Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. A first of a few, inshallah, events that we are hoping to organize over the next few weeks as we are all housebound, staying at home. I hope everybody is safe. This is the first event that we do, so please do bear with us, the first online event, so please do bear with us if there are any technical glitches here or there. Inshallah, I'll just go through the general format for this session so everyone is aware. And in a while, I'll introduce our speaker, Sadiq Ali Premji, who will be speaking to us about the topic of this seminar, which is about accessing financial support during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we will be covering three main areas during this talk. The first is the coronavirus job retention scheme, then the business interruption loan scheme, and finally self-employment income support scheme. After each of these sessions, if anybody has any questions, then if you're following us on Zoom rather than on YouTube, at the bottom of your app or of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A section. If you just type up your question there, then we'll pick it up from there, and inshallah we'll be able to answer your question based on that. I've got a comment coming in saying that the stream on YouTube seems to be slower and cutting the voice off. So if anybody is joining us on YouTube and you're able to join us on Zoom, then it might be better for you to join us on Zoom to have a better quality of the audio. And so we'll go through the three areas that I mentioned. But before that, I just wanted to say a few words about Al-Ayn, the charity that is bringing this seminar to you today, and the work that we are doing. I know many of you are already familiar with our work, but just to give a quick update as well on the work that we are doing. So if I try and share my screen, hopefully you can all see the screen with me now. So as many of you are aware, Iraq probably has the highest proportion of orphaned children to population in the world. A study by Iraq's planning ministry has found that there is more than 1 million orphaned children living in Iraq. And you can see the smiles that are on many of the faces in front of us, because this is how we like to portray the children that we are supporting and maintaining their dignity and their positive outlook. However, behind each and every one of these smiles is a story of suffering, of pain, of tragedy, of financial difficulty that they are facing in this life. And Al-Ayn exists to serve these children, to empower them, to provide them with all the tools and opportunities that they need to integrate into society and achieve their potential. And we achieve this through providing comprehensive social care, a comprehensive level of support to more than 62,000 children all over Iraq. The number of children that we have supported from the beginning of Al-Ayn in 2006 till now is more than 110,000, but currently we are supporting over 62,000 children, providing them with monthly allowances, the bulk of our work, at least £55 a month to each child, provided to them in the most dignified way that we can, and maintaining appropriate records and documentation of the disbursement of all the funds that we give to make sure we achieve the highest levels of transparency possible. And in addition to the financial aid, we provide them with donations in kind, such as food items, such as household equipment, and other items that they need for their livelihoods. We also have a medical department that looks after the healthcare and the medical needs of the children. To date, more than 41,000 treatments have been provided to both the orphaned children and to the widowed mothers as well, including some operations within Iraq and outside of Iraq. Alongside that, we look after the mental health of the children through a psychological rehabilitation program, with the first such center being opened in Baghdad, in the capital, in our headquarters in Iraq, where more than 1,600 cases have been registered, including anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other cases that need urgent attention to make sure that the mental well-being of the children is catered for. We also have a strong vocational training program through the Luminous Stars Center, which I know many of you have contributed to, where we have various courses, various workshops, including hairdressing, as you can see, sewing, computer skills, handicrafts, mobile repair, etc. So that for those children who for some reason or the other have left their education, they have some way of making sure that they can depend on themselves, learn a skill, and integrate into society. This is the center that was built in Kadmiyya in Baghdad, and we have 12 other centers currently being built across Iraq, providing the children in those different provinces with the same access to these opportunities. That was the work within Iraq, and then across the globe, we've got, as you know, our office here in the UK, but also we've got registered offices in Canada, the US, Australia, and across European countries, of communities coming together to do their part in providing care and support for those orphaned children. That bulk of the work, as I mentioned, is looking after the orphaned children, but Al-Ayn has also on a couple of occasions taken the responsibility of responding to emergencies that have occurred in Iraq. In 2003, after the attacks of ISIS and the displacement of thousands of families across Iraq, Al-Ayn took on board providing care and support to the internally displaced people within Iraq. More than 4,000 families had been supported all the way up to the end of 2018, where this campaign stopped with the return of most internally displaced people back to their hometown, and more than 78,000 food parcels were distributed. Similarly, with this current pandemic, Al-Ayn has also taken on the responsibility and duty of reaching out to orphaned children, but to all families living in poor areas that are impacted by the lockdown, by the crisis. And therefore, we've launched a global campaign to raise funds to purchase food items, sanitization material, and potentially provide medical treatments and other urgent needs that those families may have. You can follow us on our social media channels to see the preparations on the ground in terms of preparing these materials. We've got volunteers producing 2,500 medical masks per day to support the volunteers and staff who will be carrying out this immense relief effort. And with your support, we hope to be able to raise enough funds to reach out to more and more families. So that's briefly the kind of work that Al-Ayn is doing. Of course, all of that is with the support of His Eminence Sayyid Sistani, who has been behind the establishment of Al-Ayn, has given his permission for Al-Ayn to receive religious dues and other donations, and whose office covers all the admin fees of Al-Ayn so that 100% of your donations continue to reach those who are in need. And even though we are currently unable to provide some of the services we normally provide in terms of sadaqah boxes, etc., for those of you who want to support all of these different campaigns, you can do so through our website, alayn.co.uk, but also by downloading our app, which is available on both Android and iPhone. If you just search for the Al-Ayn app or go to alayn.co.uk/app, you'll be able to also download our app where you can make these donations. So that's just a quick overview of the work that Al-Ayn is doing. And I'd now like to introduce our speaker, Sadiq Ali Premji, who is a principal partner at SP Vinshaw with broad experience in all aspects really of financial accounting, auditing, business forecasting, business planning, management, accounting, taxation, etc. So he comes to us with a wealth of experience that can help us know a bit more about the kind of financial packages that the government is providing during this crisis, He has specific expertise in the healthcare industry and the regulatory environment, but I'm sure, inshallah, he can help us more widely than that with different questions that that people have. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sadiq Ali to speak to us firstly about the job retention scheme. Sadiq Ali, if you're there, you can please just maybe unmute your microphone and turn on your video, and then you can join us, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. How are you?
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for joining us, Sadiq. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
the Al-Ayn Sadaqa box there in the background as well. So we wanted to speak first of all about the job retention scheme. So if you can just start maybe by giving an overview of this scheme.
Yeah, basically the government, amid the crisis of COVID-19, the government announced on the 20th of March initially about the job retention scheme to specifically support businesses that could not retain their workers, that would have otherwise have had to lay off their workers or make them redundant. And as a result of that, the crisis going on, the government announced that they would support these businesses to not lay off these workers, but furlough them, which is like a temporary layoff, and the government would support 80% of their wages to the businesses so that the business can continue to pay these employees whilst we remain in lockdown and there is obviously reduced level of activities for all the businesses.
Sure. So you mentioned furlough. Can you just explain that word briefly?
I mean, furlough is a US Latin word, and it means temporary layoff. So when a person is furloughed, they are not supposed to be undertaking any other work for the employer. They can do voluntary work for any other organization, or they can undertake training provided they are paid at least the national minimum wage for the training time that they for the time they spend training themselves on the job, etc. Because they're obviously like any other business. A lot of businesses don't have enough time to train their employees whilst they are busy with day-to-day routine, and this may be one of the ways of actually promoting training amongst your team as well. So and that's what it is. And obviously we'll cover some of these matters later in the session as to whether you can furlough, unfurlough, you can do shift furloughing or not, etc., which we'll cover when we go through the various things in the session.
Sure. And who does this scheme cover exactly? Who is
so well, first of all, it's any business any UK organization is eligible for the scheme. Okay, so whether it's a sole trader, it's a limited company, it's a limited liability partnership, a charity, any UK organization that basically employs people and has a PAYE scheme registered will qualify for the scheme.
Okay, and what type of staff is covered by this?
So it's your permanent staff, your contract staff, your 0 hours contracted staff, agency workers. So it covers all sort of these staff who are paid via the PAYE scheme.
And how is it calculated in relation to seasonal staff, for example?
So in relation to, well, the guidance says in terms of calculation, the government will pay 80% of the higher of the wages same month previous year. So for example, if you have furloughed your employee from the 1st of April, say, and you're coming up to the end of April and you have to pay the employee, you will have to look at what the employee had earned in April 2019 or the average of the last 12 months. So it's the higher of the two amounts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And the
and
government will also cover the employer cost, which is the pension cost, and the employer NIC as well.
okay, and you mentioned the 80%. Is the employer obliged to top it up with the remainder, or?
There is currently there is no obligation on the employer to top up the 20%, but there is nothing that is preventing the employer from topping it up if they wish to.
So it's to the discretion of the employer, basically, if they want
Yes. Yeah.
or not. And then to be eligible, does the employer need to kind of document the need or why that particular number of staff is being followed? Do they need, is there any?
Yeah, well, you'll have to have a consultation with your members of staff, and it is basically the guide, the more recent guidance that came out on the 4th of April, basically specifically says that it's for employers who cannot currently maintain their workforce. So basically, it's for those employers who would have otherwise made their workforce redundant or laid them off, and uh, so basically it's for those who cannot maintain their current workforce.
And does this need to be documented in any way? Or?
Yes, you'll have to have consultation with your employees, and it needs to be documented. You need to check whether your contract of employment allows for the layoff, whether it has a layoff clause within it or not. If not, you will have to have a conversation with your employee, and obviously you will have a choice of whether you they take an unpaid time off, they get made redundant, or they become furloughed. So the likelihood is most employees will agree to being furloughed.
Sure. And then can the employee themselves request it, or is it something that the has to?
No, it is up to the employer to furlough. It's not the employees themselves.
It's not the employee
But
themselves.
obviously we have to take into account other circumstances, like say if an employee is shielding somebody or is taking care of a vulnerable person at home uh, because of the COVID-19 crisis, then obviously they can be furloughed.
Sure. And then you mentioned volunteering or doing other work. Can you elaborate maybe a bit more on that?
Yeah. So during the time the employee is furloughed, they cannot undertake any work for any income generating work for the employer through which they have been furloughed, but they can continue, they can work for another employer or continue to do volunteering work, provided obviously they'll have to look whether their contract of employment allows them to work for another employer or not, or whether they've got a duty to notify, etc., because obviously there's competition clause and other factors that need to be considered. But they can definitely undertake volunteering work, and it may be a good time for people to actually consider doing some volunteering work at the time of crisis.
So I understand that if they're working for a charity, then and they're followed, the volunteer work has to be with another
With
charity,
another, yeah.
the same charity. So we have a question here asking if furlough applies even to workers on 0 hours contracts.
Yes, it does apply to even 0 hour contracts.
I think you mentioned it will be based on calculating the.
Based on calculating, yeah. So obviously the initial guidance that first came out on the 26th of March had that the employee had to be on your payroll on the 28th of February. The more recent guidance actually has clarified it to say that the employee had to be on your PAYE scheme in February or any time before February. And we believe that is to obviously cover any 0 hour contracted workers, because they may have worked in 1 month and not in another month.
Sure. And then in terms of timelines, when is this applicable from? When do we expect
So
this?
the Chancellor backdated it from the 1st of March 2020. And yeah, but again, for businesses who want to claim these and who have actually furloughed their employees need to make sure that they abide by the condition of the scheme. So although the Chancellor has backdated it from the 1st of March, um, it will mainly apply to those businesses that had already suffered the COVID-19 impact and maybe had made people redundant from their workforce as at 29th of February, or um, and may now consider re-employing those people again and putting them on furlough.
Sure. And then how long do you expect this to last?
So it's currently on for 3 months, but the Chancellor had also mentioned that it may be extended if need be.
We have another question. Remember, if you have any questions on this section on the job retention scheme, please do enter your question into the Q&A section at the bottom. A question someone is the employer obligated to furlough a worker on a 0-hour contract if they can't keep them, or can they lay them off?
I mean, the employer is not obligated to furlough them. They may wish to lay them off, but it may make sense for the employer to furlough them, right? Because if the employee agrees to be paid 80% and the employer is able to claim that from the HMRC, uh, and they may require the resources at a later date, it may make sense to sort of furlough then lay them off.
Will there be any additional financial costs to the employer if they keep them on at the 80%?
The only other obligation is that the terms of the contract of employment continue to be applied while you are furloughed. So the holidays will continue to be accrued. So obviously there is a cost for holiday payments, and all other contractual obligations continue to apply as normal.
Sure. But in terms of employer NI and pension,
This will be recoverable from the government.
Up to a maximum of 2,500 a month?
No. So the 2,500 maximum is actually what the employee's ordinary wage cost would be. In addition to that, the government will also support for the employer's NIC and the pension cost. It wasn't very clear initially, but further guidance does suggest that is the case.
And the question is, how will the employer be paid by HMRC?
So the HMRC is currently in the process of setting up a separate online portal for this, and more details are yet to come out. Once we get more details, we will, obviously either send out the leaflet to all those who have subscribed for this seminar.
Sure, thank you. That'd be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And then, is the government likely to allow furlough for PSC limited companies for individuals?
So, I mean, there was for PSC limited companies, I suppose the only employee that can be furloughed is the directors, because they are working for themselves. Now, the problem here seems to be that the directors in PSC companies usually tend to take a very low amount of salary and a higher amount in terms of dividends. Unfortunately, only the salary or the wage amount would qualify for being under the coronavirus job retention scheme, and the director cannot then undertake any further work for the company other than his fiduciary duties or statutory obligations.
Oh, thank you. If anybody has any other questions on job retention scheme, and I'll give you a few minutes to type them up so that we can move up to the next section. Unless I don't have anything else to add as well in relation to job retention.
I mean, something that might be important to some of the attendees is whether those employees who are on a work permit or on a sponsored or on a visa, on a work visa, whether they can be furloughed or not is something that we get often asked by a lot of our clients. And the answer is yes, they can be furloughed. And the UK Visa and Immigration has also issued its own guidance and confirmed that they can utilize, they can be furloughed, and there's no problem, and it will not hinder their visa applications, etc.
And how about if somebody's already on leave, annual leave or
If
maternity?
some if somebody is already on annual leave, then they would be on your payroll as at the end of February anyway, and you can furlough an employee who is on annual leave, even those on sick pay, even those who are on a sick leave, they
Mm.
could also be furloughed once their sick leave is over.
Thank you. In which case, I think we'll move on to the next section. Perhaps we can speak first about the self-employment income support scheme. So maybe you can give
Yeah.
us an overview and then any questions on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So when the chancellor had announced on the 20th of March support for the employed people, there's a lot of cloud as to what happens about self-employed people, because we have quite a number of people who are self-employed. So on the 26th of March, the chancellor announced a self-employed income support scheme, or SEAS, and the scheme again is mirrored to the employment support scheme, where it's a maximum of 2,500. It's applicable from the 1st of March to the 31st of May, so same time period, which is 3 months. Uh, and it applies to anyone who is self-employed, and includes members of partnerships and limited liability partnerships, uh, provided the trading profits are less than 50,000 and more than 50% of their income stream is from self-employment.
And that covers directors of limited companies.
So unfortunately, the directors of limited companies, well, if they're taking out dividends is not part of your self-employment income.
So they'll be eligible, but on the basis of the figures that are.
No, they will. I mean, they will not, because dividends is not part of your self-employment income. The only thing they'll be eligible for is through the coronavirus job retention scheme.
I see.
Yeah,
So just to
and
clarify, for directors of limited companies, they won't be eligible for
yeah,
this self-employment.
unless in their own capacity they are self-employed and have some other consultancy income, etc., not through a limited
Not through the
entity, but in their own capacity as a sole trader or in partnership.
Right. And then this self-employment income support scheme. So in terms of eligibility, I understand that they need to have been impacted by the crisis and show that they have had a loss in profits.
Yeah, so they would have to demonstrate that they've lost trading profits due to the COVID-19 situation. So, for example, if it's a say say it's an Uber driver uh, who is self-employed, and because there's a lockdown now, it's obvious that they would have lost income because they cannot work during this period. Uh, so obviously they would have suffered loss in trading profits, and they would have to make sure that they would have to also confirm that they have traded in 2019 2020, and that intend to continue to trade in 2020 2021 tax year as well.
Yeah. And then how do you apply for this scheme?
So the HMR, again, the details are not yet fully out. The Chancellor, when he announced the scheme, he mentioned that the details and more details on how to apply for the scheme will be out in June.
And then do you apply for it yourself? Because I've got a question here saying I'm self-employed. I haven't received a call
Yeah.
from MRC
So
regarding an
so
eligible.
they said that HMRC would be contacting and inviting those eligible to apply. Applications will need to be made online once invitations have been issued by HMRC. However, one could also simply check themselves whether they qualify or not by looking at their tax returns and navigating through whether they qualify or not in terms of seeking whether their 2018-19 trading profits were less than 50,000 and more than 50% of their employment, more than 50% of their income was from self-employment, or the average trading profits for the last 3 years were less than 50,000, and that more than 50% of their income is through self-employment.
Right. So then I've got another question. What is the process for me to go about getting the benefits? So as you mentioned, they need to wait for them to be invited. And then once they're invited, then the application process will become clear. Is that right?
Yes.
And then someone's asking, I have my own limited company, whom I am registered a director and a payee employee on its register. My company is a driving school, so I have no office. I pay myself a wage as payee, which is minimum due to tax purposes. My question is, what can I apply for?
Well, so the wage, the minimum amount that they put through the PAYE, they will qualify for the coronavirus job interactions uh, scheme, job retention scheme, and they will unfortunately not qualify for the self-employment income support scheme, but they may qualify for the universal tax credit scheme. They may contact universal tax credit, and they'll be able to assist them with the application
So
to support them.
if they apply for the job retention scheme, that would mean though that they cannot work during that period. They will have to not work for them.
Yeah, they'll have to not work for that period.
And can you tell us a bit more about the universal credit scheme as well?
The universal credit scheme, I think it's basically the chancellor has removed the ceiling for the minimum earning ceilings in respect of applying for the scheme, because it is now being judged on the basis of what you will be earning in the future rather than what you earned in the past. So many of us who would have not ordinarily qualified based on previous earnings may now qualify for it, and it's basically means based tested as well. So there's a sort of lot of questions that one would need to answer in terms of who your dependents are, the your income, your expenses, etc., and then they would go through. But I understand at the moment HMRC is quite busy with that, and there's a long queue.
And coming back to the self-employment scheme as well, someone asks, how do they work out how much money you are eligible for based on your last 3 years?
Okay, so say for example, your trading profits were 40,000 for 2018-19, and your trading profits for 2000 2018-19 for trading profits were 40,000, then you would take the average monthly income on that basis, and 80% of that is what would qualify for the coronavirus self-employed support scheme. Now, the reason that they also work out on average is that, say for example, in 18-19 somebody's income was 51,000, in 17-18 their income was 45,000, and 16-17 your income was 40,000. So obviously when you take the average of the 3 years, you would fall below the 50,000 threshold and you'd be eligible to apply. But if you look at your 18-19 tax return only, you may not qualify for the scheme.
Sure. That answers the question. I've got a couple of questions coming through back to furlough, if you don't mind taking
That's
as
fine.
well. There are two related questions. The first is, I am a vulnerable person. Is there no way I can enforce furlough? So I'm guessing the employer is requiring them to continue their work, so they want to see if they can enforce it. And another person saying, I am 1 year from retirement, but I have underlying health issues. Is there no way I can enforce furlough? So,
So,
same.
I mean, if you have underlying issues, I suppose you can suggest your employer. You can have a discussion with your employer, and I'm sure they'll be able to agree to furlough you, because one of the criteria is that employee employers also need to consider those who are vulnerable and have underlying conditions.
But that's a conversation with the employer. There's no
That's a
way
conversation with the
to it
employer.
in any way.
But it's in the guidance that the employers need to consider that as well when selecting who can be furloughed.
Again, the next related question is that if a worker is on a 0-hour contract and has had their hours stopped until the situation changes, but the employer refuses to furlough them, is the worker able to claim the, I think they meant 80% from HMRC or the government directly?
Unfortunately, if the employer refuses to furlough you, then you can't do anything, because the whole scheme is at the discretion of the employer.
Right. So again, the conversation needs to be had with the employer.
Yeah.
But in terms of the financial impact on the employer, it should be close to zero if they follow at the 80%.
Yes. Yeah.
Government will be covering that. So I guess good luck to that person in having that conversation with the employer. Any more questions on the self-employment scheme as well, before we move on to business interruption loan? Another question with regards to furlough: if the employer decides to pay the employee the full amount, would that extra 20% be questioned by HMRC? So would they kind of ask why?
No, they wouldn't be questioned, because it's at the discretion of the employer. Of course, any employer costs in relation to the additional 20%, i.e., the employer's national insurance contributions and the pension contributions to the tune of that additional 20%, would need to be borne by the employer.
But is there kind of any incentive for employees to pay that 20%, or is that put in place?
I mean, some employers may take a view that they're paying it out of goodwill. Uh, some employers may have key employees who they wish to retain, and therefore they would continue to pay them. So there's other commercial reasons as to why a business would choose to do that.
Thank you, Sada. So if we move on to speak about business interruption loan scheme. Actually, before that, just the final question on furlough as well. To clarify the job retention scheme, is this available in June and we get invited for this application?
No. The job retention scheme is available from April. The self-employment income support scheme is the one that will be available. The applications will be you'll be able to make applications from June, and that HMRC will write to those eligible. But it may be worth somebody just checking out if they're eligible, and in June contacting HMRC just to be proactive.
Sure. So with the job retention, the only thing we're waiting for is just how to apply for
the scheme.
Otherwise, it's applicable from
Yeah,
first.
and we are told that the scheme, the details will be out either by the second week of this month or more towards the third week.
Sure. Okay, so business interruption loan scheme. Again, if you can give an overview, and then we can welcome questions.
Yeah. So the business interruption loan scheme, this was another measure that the government had introduced to help, businesses that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic situation, where businesses that were viable businesses before the situation happened, before the pandemic crisis, will be able to apply for loans through their current banks, and these loans will be guaranteed by up to 80% by the government. Obviously, there has been certain revisions to the scheme since it first started, because like anything, bankers would always assess any loan applications to sort of see whether it is in relation, uh, would assess the loan applications in similar way to any commercial lending criteria. And as a result, a lot of businesses were being turned around. Some banks were exploring the opportunities of having security first, and then, if they failed to explore any security through the business, then go on to the business interruption loan scheme. But then over the last couple of weeks, we have seen a raft of changes in the process, and that the chancellor and the business chancellor secretary as well obviously interfered and have had discussions with all the lenders. And I think it's now much easier to access the scheme.
And what's the eligibility criteria?
Yeah, so the eligibility criteria is that any UK businesses with annual turnover of up to 45 million, uh, and which derive at least 50% of their income from trading activities, is eligible to apply for the CBIL loan. And this could be a sole trader, a limited company, partnership, even freelancers would be eligible to apply for the CBIL loan.
Okay, so including limited companies.
Yes, limited companies as well. Yeah.
And then with regards to interest and fees on these loans, would they still be applicable?
Yeah, so the interest and fees would be applicable, but it's 12 months interest free
12
for the
months.
first 12 months. And the interest rate is obviously dependent between what your bank will charge you, and is open to negotiation with your own bank.
But the first 12 months will be covered.
The first 12 months will be interest free.
And then there was some extension to include large companies as well.
Yeah, there were some, because there were companies that were stuck between the 45 million and above. So there is now an extension to cover companies that fall between the 45 million to 500 million mark within the CBIL scheme as well. And it's called the Coronavirus Large Business Interruption Loan Scheme.
So if anyone here has a large business with over 45 million and has any questions, then please do ask as well. And please remember Al-Ayn as well. I think there's a next question here with regards to personal guarantee. If you can just clarify that again in terms of the loans requiring or not requiring personal guarantees.
Yeah, so as we understand, loans up to 250, loans under 250,000 require no personal guarantees. Loans above that amount do require personal guarantees, but obviously the personal guarantees are limited to just 20% of the amount, because 80% has been backed by government security, by government guarantee.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on business interruption loan scheme? And then please do enter them. But in the meantime, Sadaf, so are there any other current schemes or financial schemes available for people to access?
No, well, at the moment, these are the main schemes that are available, and obviously the universal tax credit scheme that we spoke about as well earlier. And I mean, there are, unfortunately, all those who are running PSCs, personal service companies, and taking a lower amount of salary with higher amount of dividends. A lot of limited company directors have been affected, and they cannot claim under any of these schemes other than they would be able to get a business interruption loan because they would qualify for that.
Oh. And then where can we stay posted on these developments and details?
So there have been the .gov.uk website is updated on a daily basis as and when changes happen for the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, and so I would suggest people to look through the gov.uk website for any further updates.
Thank you. And we've got the contact details of those who participated. You mentioned a couple of things we can circulate.
Yeah.
As they come along, so we'll do that as well. There's a question with regards to business loans. Is there a minimum requirement for eligibility? Who decides how much loan to take out?
Yeah, so the requirement is like any other loan application. The bank would want to ensure that the business will be able to repay the loan, and the business should have been a viable business before the crisis, i.e., should have been mm, should be a profitable business, or should be a business that is able to meet its obligations before the crisis. And as a result of the crisis, they're now in a situation where they're not able to meet all their costs, etc. So normal items such as your business accounts, your management accounts, cash flow forecasts would be required to support any loan applications.
Okay. And then a question, how do we apply for the under 250k loan?
How do we apply it? The applications is obviously through your own banks. So if you're banking with Barclays or NatWest or Lloyds, then your bank managers should have sent you the criteria for applications, because each bank has got a different sort of application form. We have done a few with NatWest and Barclays where we have seen questions like, how has the business been affected by the pandemic situation? What is the plan? Is there any cash injection that the owners can put in? So there's questions surrounding, similar questions to that in the application forms, and then obviously they need to be supported by the financials of the business and the cash flow forecasts.
Okay. And then kind of, how do they guarantee that the government will consider it eligible? I mean, is it two applications that they need to go through at the same time?
No, it's the application that the banks will assess the applications, and once they've assessed the application, they will look at the viability of the business, and it's up to the bank to decide uh, that this will qualify for CBL, and then approve the application, and they have to tell the government that this is the loan, these are the loans that have been approved
Oh, so
under the
it's a
scheme.
specific application for kind
Yeah,
of a
yeah,
scheme rather than a normal application, which is then assessed for
yeah.
corruption. I don't know if you've got any other questions. If not, Sadaf, I'll just ask you if you've got any kind of final words of advice for people as we go through
No, I
this.
mean, think we are all in it together. So if anybody needs any support or any further guidance in any of the things we have covered today, then feel free to contact us, and we'll see how we can assist you. I'm sure if they can, uh, we'll be able to assist as much as we can.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you much. Thank you very much, Sadaf, again for your time. I really appreciate taking time out of your busier than normal schedule these days with people and your clients contacting you with all these questions and queries. So much appreciated. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you will agree with me that I personally find this very useful and helpful to understand the different levels of support provided. And if you do have any further queries, please do contact us. Someone's asking how to contact Sadaq and ask for his services. Well, if you're happy with that, Sadaq, I'll pass on your contact details.
Yeah, you can pass on our contact details.
Well, to that person and anybody else who would like to. So thank you very much once again, Sadaq, and everybody for joining us in the first of a number of online events we're hoping to hold. On Friday, we will be holding an annual dua nadwa, which we normally in person. Inshallah, this time we'll be having it as an online event with a reciter joining us from Bahrain. And then on the 18th, we have an event looking at will writing, where we'll be having scholars speaking about the Islamic perspective of writing a will, and a solicitor talking to us about the legal aspects of writing a will. This is an event that we were planning to hold before the pandemic happened in Leicester. It got postponed, so inshallah now we'll be holding it as an online event. But please do follow us on our Facebook or Instagram at Al-Ayn UK. Also visit the links you can see on your screen for the WhatsApp in English or in Arabic. And you can stay posted about our various events. So other than that, thank you very much everybody for joining, and hope you have
Thank you.
you enjoy staying at home, and have a good day. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sadak.
Thank you.